This is something that's been talked about a lot recently, so I wanted to take a closer look. Should the MLB expand to Mexico? Baseball is considered Mexico's third most popular sport after football and boxing, and in a country of almost 130 million people, that's a huge audience to tap into. We've seen huge Mexican crowds in the WBC games in Miami, and we've seen huge crowds in Mexico when the MLB came to visit. Clearly, the fans would be more than capable of supporting an MLB team. It seems like the time is now for MLB to expand to a Mexican city. When considering expansion, it really comes down to two different cities, Mexico City and Monterrey. First, let's take a look at Mexico City. Mexico City's metropolitan area has about 22 million people, which is more than both New York City and Los Angeles. That means a lot of potential fans. Crime rates in Mexico City are bad, but not as bad as most people think. There are about 45.3 crimes per 1,000 people in Mexico City, which is lower than Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Detroit, all of which already have MLB franchises. So Mexico City certainly has the population for an MLB team, and crime rates aren't too big of an issue. However, there are still some problems with Mexico City. One thing to consider is whether or not people in Mexico City are wealthy enough to support the franchise. The average salary there is about 346,000 Mexican pesos a year, which translates to just under 20,000 US dollars a year. That's about a third of what it is in the US. When income levels are low, then fewer people will be able to afford to go to games, buy merchandise, and just support the team in general. However, the sheer population in Mexico City could counter the low income levels. Another issue with Mexico City is building a ballpark. Most stadiums in America are built in part by public funds. In wealthy American cities, the government is usually willing to step in and pay for part of the stadium. However, in Mexico City, that may not be possible. It's unlikely that the city would be willing to pour public funds into building a stadium, especially if it meant taking funds away from more important things like public infrastructure and public education. And it's even more unlikely that MLB could afford to build the stadium on its own without the aid of public funds. It would be a huge investment that's very risky. There is an existing stadium in Mexico City that MLB could use, Estadio Alfredo Harpe Lu, a new stadium built in 2019 with a seating capacity of just over 20,000. The stadium is pretty nice, although its seating capacity is a bit too low for MLB standards. Most MLB stadiums hold about 40,000 or so fans. If the MLB expanded to Mexico City, they would either have to renovate the stadium to add more seating, or they'd have to tear down the stadium and build a new one in its place, which would be really expensive and unlikely to happen. There are other issues with Mexico City as well. For example, elevation. Mexico City has an elevation of 7,350 feet above sea level, which is 2,000 feet higher than Denver, Colorado, where the Rockies games are held. That means a lot of home runs. In the Mexico series in late April, the San Diego Padres and the San Francisco Giants played 2 games in Mexico City. In those 2 games, 14 home runs were hit with a total of 26 runs scored. That is ridiculous, and that alone makes Mexico City an unlikely candidate for an expansion team. The popularity of baseball there has been put into question as well, as baseball has historically lagged behind football and boxing in Mexico. It's not even certain whether there would be enough of a fan base to support a franchise in the first place. In conclusion, an expansion team in Mexico City seems very unlikely for the time being, but there are still many other candidates for an MLB team in Mexico. For example, Monterrey. Monterrey's metropolitan area is the second largest in Mexico after Mexico City, with more than 5.3 million people. The city is located about 430 miles north of Mexico City, making it much more accessible to the rest of the MLB. Monterrey's average salary is comparable to Mexico City, at about 326,000 Mexican pesos a year, or 20,000 US dollars a year. Again, that's pretty low and would make it difficult for the fans to support the franchise. Monterrey is located in northern Mexico, where baseball is historically more popular than it is in southern and central Mexico. Monterrey has a crime rate of 48 crimes per 1,000 residents, which is slightly higher than Mexico City, but still lower than Detroit and Washington, D.C. Monterrey already has a pretty nice baseball stadium, Palacio Sultan, which seats about 22,000 fans. That's again a little bit too low by MLB standards. Most MLB stadiums seat around 40,000 fans. However, it is possible that an MLB team could use this facility. If MLB expands to Monterrey, they could use this stadium for a year or two to start. If they consistently have sellout crowds there, then maybe they consider building a bigger ballpark or renovating Palacio Sultan to add an extra 10,000 or so seats. If the MLB decides to build a new stadium, then again, there's the issue of public funding. There would need to be considerable public funding for the construction of the ballpark, and it would be difficult to get the city on board with such a big investment. However, I do think public funding for the stadium would be more likely in Monterrey than Mexico City. There was already a push in 2003 to move the Montreal Expos to Monterrey before they landed in Washington, so clearly Monterrey is a big candidate for an MLB team. Furthermore, Monterrey's baseball team in the Mexican League, the Sultanes Monterrey, draw huge crowds every day, and there would definitely be even bigger crowds should an MLB team move in. Okay, so we've now gotten a good sense of both Monterrey and Mexico City, so now let's compare the two. Mexico City's average income is slightly higher than Monterrey's, although it's very close. Mexico City also has a slightly lower crime rate than Monterrey. Mexico City also has more than 4 times the population of Monterrey at 22 million. However, there are some disadvantages to Mexico City as well. For example, the extreme elevation of the city would cause a boom in offense and inflated ERAs for the pitchers, whereas in Monterrey, that's not really an issue. Furthermore, Mexico City is extremely far from the US border and would make travel times really long, whereas Monterrey is at a reasonable distance to the rest of the MLB. Another more obscure factor to take into consideration is where the cities are located in the region. Mexico City is located in the south, where, at least historically, baseball is much less popular. Monterrey, on the other hand, is located in the north, where there are usually more baseball fans. If MLB were to set up a team in Monterrey, not only would they get fans from Monterrey itself, but they would also get fans from all over northern Mexico, where people from places like Saltillo and all over Nuevo Leon could come to the ballpark. So although Mexico City has a higher population, there may not be as many baseball fans as there are in Monterrey. Tijuana. Tijuana is another sizable Mexican city just located south of the border on the Pacific coast. However, the population of the metro area there is just under 2 million, far less than Mexico City and Monterrey. Furthermore, their income levels are also very low, only 286,000 Mexican pesos a year, or $16,000 US a year. Another option is Chihuahua. Their average income is comparable to Mexico City and Monterrey, but their population is less than 1 million people, which pretty much automatically disqualifies them from the running. Guadalajara is another Mexican city to consider. However, their income levels are about 284,000 pesos, or $16,000 US a year, which is way too low, and historically, baseball isn't as popular in Guadalajara as it is in the northern Mexican regions. Mexico will continue to be a hot topic for an MLB expansion team. Baseball is extremely popular there, and if the MLB could land just one expansion team in Mexico, the whole country of 130 million people would rally behind the team. That is a huge market, and one the MLB certainly wants to tap into, but as of right now, it doesn't seem very likely. The problem with Mexico, when it really comes down to it, is income levels. There just isn't quite enough wealth to support a franchise just yet. However, Mexico has seen a strong 4.7% annual GDP growth, which is very sizable. If Mexico can continue to grow economically and in population, then it's only a matter of time until the country can land an MLB franchise. As of right now, it seems like MLB expansion is on the horizon. While over the past few years there's been a drop in viewership for MLB games, this year, perhaps with the new rules, the MLB attendance has made a healthy rebound. If attendance and viewership keeps increasing over the next few years, it feels likely that the MLB will expand, and when they do, Mexico will certainly be on the table. Thanks for watching, everyone. This was a bit of a different video than usual, so hopefully you all liked it. If you have any thoughts about MLB expansion to Mexico or anything else, drop it down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And other than that, I'll see you in the next one.